right, so we are live. Welcome to anyone who's watching for Ms. JD's first pre-law program hangout. Today we're going to sit down with a couple of our illustrious board members and talk about their pre-law experiences, and they'll get to share their advice and insights on how to navigate being a pre-law student or pre-law professional. So to kick it off with a few introductions, my name is Laura Plato, and I am Ms. JD's pre-law programs manager and programs manager. I currently live and work in Washington, D.C., and I'm going to hand it over to Katie Larkin-Wong to introduce herself.
Hi, I'm Katie Larkin-Wong. I am an associate at Latham & Watkins in San Francisco, where I practice in antitrust and white-collar crime. I'm the current president of Ms. JD, and I graduated from Northwestern Law in 2011. I was also a transfer student, so I transferred from Georgetown.
Okay. And Liz Baseman.
Sure. Hi, everybody. My name is Liz Baseman, and I graduated from American University this year in May 2014, and I took the New York bar exam.
All right. And Ms. Rochelle Tasher.
Hi, everyone. I'm Rochelle Tasher. I'm an associate at Robertson Anschutz and Snide. I practice bankruptcy law and creditors' rights, and I live in South Florida. And I went to Florida A&M University College of Law in Orlando, Florida.
All right. So we're also hoping that Helen Randolph will be joining us shortly, or she's having a few technical difficulties. But in the meantime, we'll get started with a couple of questions. So did you all know that did you always know that you wanted to be an attorney, or was there a particular point in time where you realized that law school was what you wanted to do? And any one of you can jump in. There's no particular order.
I'll go first. I actually was someone who knew I wanted to be an attorney from, like, you know, yay high to a grasshopper kind of a thing. But I also watched my mom go through the process of figuring out law school and actually being in law school while I was in high school. And as a result, I knew that I wanted to make sure that it was what I really wanted to be doing. I knew it was a tough career. So I paralegaled for a couple years after I graduated from undergrad with Verizon's corporate counsel, and realized that I really loved it, went to trial, got sick, the whole 9 yards. And despite everyone telling me that they thought I was a masochist, I fell completely in love with it. And so, yeah, I totally knew from the argumentative, you know, preteen into teenager that law was what I wanted to do.
Awesome.
Liz or Ray?
This is Rochelle. I did want to be a lawyer. It's so funny because when I was younger, I always kept a diary and a journal, and whenever I look back at that journal, I had 3 things that I wanted to do. I wanted to be a fashion designer, I wanted to study marketing, and I wanted to be a lawyer. So after I realized that fashion wasn't my thing, and career in marketing was not a possibility, I decided to stick with the law. And the cool thing is that I fell in love with business. I think that's another question, but my undergraduate major was political science with a minor in economics. And by the time I got to my senior year at FAMU undergrad, I had so many economics courses, and I didn't know, you know, should I get a PhD in economics, should I get a master's? But I found that within the law, there's so many different business aspects, and there's so much, you know, businessy economics things that you can get into with the law, that I found that law school was the best option for me. And I love the flexibility versus a PhD.
Awesome.
So yeah, I actually, kind of similar to Rochelle, I wasn't completely sure, but I knew that law school was a possibility and something that I wanted to do. And I was a finance major and political science minor in college. But I graduated kind of at the height of the economic bubble. And so I went working for an attorney at an adoption agency, and she really motivated me to go to law school And so after a year working for her, I decided to go. And here I am.
Great. So kind of, Rochelle had already touched on this in terms of what she studied in undergrad. So Rochelle mentioned she studied poli-sci and economics. Katie and Liz, what did you guys study in undergrad? And did that translate into your legal careers or what you pursued in law school?
Yeah, so I studied finance and political science, so it was similar. There was many business law courses, and I had a few internships that touched on it. And I think it was really helpful, kind of like Rochelle said, business affects everything with the law. So it definitely was helpful going into law school to have that background.
So not similarly, I studied government and psychology. And actually, at my undergrad, a lot of the psychology professors did studies on psych and law. So it was juries and how juries perceive things and things like that. So I'd done quite a bit of undergrad work around law. But, in terms of how much it helped me, it's hard to say. I think the things that you touch on every day and just having that background is really helpful. And then I think the other thing that I would say is I got the advice from a professor when I was an undergrad not to do a pre-law program, to actually go and do, a different major so that you would be going into law school with something other than what a lot of people would be going into law school with, which is pre-law. And I'm really glad he gave me that advice. It gave me the chance to kind of play around with things that were law-like, but through a different major, and that was great.
Awesome. And then Katie, you kind of already touched on our next question, that you took time off before law school and worked as a paralegal. Is there anything that you would do differently? Would you take time off again, or would you go straight through?
I am so glad I took time off. I think it was really helpful going into law school, having signed a lease and kind of understanding what that really meant. Some people do that in undergrad, but that wasn't necessary at my undergrad. I was glad to have gotten the experience of seeing how an in-house legal department works, and I think it made me a more viable candidate after I got out. And was actually looking for jobs in law. I, like Rachel and Liz, they're totally right. The more that you can understand business, the better off you will be in law, because at the end of the day, the legal problems that you're facing are inevitably also business problems. And so the more that you can understand about what your client's needs are, the better off you'll be.
Cool.
I would have traveled more, though.
Yeah,
that's what I would do. Get your travel in.
And I feel the same way. Like, I took a year off, and I think it really helped me hone in on what practice area I wanted to get into. Right now, as a bankruptcy attorney, I represent banks and creditors and really advocate for creditors' rights. While I took the year off, I actually worked for a bank and got a chance to use my economic skills and see how consumers' behaviors and different things like that. So it was really good, and I definitely recommend at least a year if you have that opportunity.
Cool. And Liz, is there anything you would have done differently with the time you took off between undergrad and law school?
The only thing I could think of was maybe doing 2 years instead of 1, but I definitely recommend taking at least a year off.
Awesome. So law school applications, is there anything specific from your time off that you think helped you with your law school applications, or that helped you, Katie mentioned the experience at Verizon helped her in the job market after law school. Is there anything within that framework that you would recommend that people do with their time off, or take advantage of to be a more competitive candidate after law school?
So I'll jump in on some things I did that I thought were really helpful. When I was applying to law school, I had no idea where I wanted to go or what I really wanted to do. So I went to, the first thing I did was I went to an Lsat fair in New York, where it had all different stands from law schools, and just walked around and met people and got to know, what each school has to offer and the different, in terms of classes, clinical experience, internships, and locations. And then after you apply, the other piece of advice I'd give is it's not over. The application isn't set. I had only started working for the adoption attorney when I first applied to law school. But then 6 months in, when the applications weren't fully, they were in, but I didn't hear anything back yet, I sent follow-up emails to the admissions officers with recommendations from my boss, which I don't know if it worked or not, but I think it's very helpful to let them know that you're very interested in them and that so much has changed in 6 months from when you initially applied.
My best advice in terms of law school application, I think the law school climate has changed in the sense that I think back in the day people just went to law school just because, and a lot of admissions counselors now are looking for students that want to practice law. You know, law school, it is expensive. I mean, I have a lot of friends that are in the upwards of $200,000 in debt, and they come out of law school and they're like, I don't even want to litigate. You know, I don't know, what do I do with this? How do I, you know, live when they realize they don't want to do or practice law anymore. So I would suggest in your application process to really portray yourself as someone that, again, this is not the absolute rule, but definitely someone that is interested in actually being a lawyer and not the thought of being a lawyer. You know, I think Law and Order can kind of be misleading sometimes, so I would definitely spend some time in that 1 to 2 year break really figuring out what it means to be an attorney, like a real life, wake up, go to court, clients calling you attorney, because a lot of my friends that realized that they didn't want to do that, it came down to it where they had to do that, you know, where they had to be a litigator, and you just don't want to be unhappy. So if you're applying to law school, just know that that's an option and that's something you would have to do is litigate. So if you don't want to be a litigator, I don't know. Yeah, that's my 2 cents.
What I love about what Rachel is saying is that you really should take that time to figure out what it is that you want to be doing. And I think it's super important. You know, law school is a big investment. I don't care how much scholarship money you get. It's a really big investment, and you can come out with a lot of debt. And that can change your career options in the future. And so, you know, really investigate what it is that you want to be doing, and think about that hard before you head in, because I think that's going to make a big difference in terms of how happy you are after you graduate and what you're doing. I don't think law school should be your default if you don't know what else you want to be doing, for sure. It's not, you know, med school or MBA or law school. It's definitely about figuring out that this is for you.
Definitely making sure that you're pursuing your passion when you go to law school. And not So did you all know what you wanted to do after law school when you went in, or did experiences in law school change what you wanted to do?
I have kind of a funny story about that, which is that when I was working for Verizon, I was working for their antitrust and intellectual property practice group. And so I was doing a lot of antitrust and IP law. And I went to law school saying, there's no way that I'm going to do that anymore. This isn't what I want to be doing. I'm totally going to go a different direction. In fact, what happened was that I ended up, like Liz, going to career fairs and finding that I was spending 45 minutes talking to, you know, antitrust attorneys, and not a whole lot of time talking to other people. It just wasn't as interesting to me. And through that process, I kind of realized that it is something that I love, and it is something that I wanted to be doing. And then I just had to figure out how to do it on the West Coast. And I was very lucky that that was an option for me at Latham. So.
Rochelle or Liz?
Yeah, I can definitely jump in here. My senior year at FAMU, I actually had a really great internship opportunity with the CIA, and I was doing intelligence work. So my passion really was political economy study, social economic study of foreign countries. So I went into law school thinking, FAMU has a great international program, and I'm going to learn from all these great international professors, and that was not the case. I fell in love with bankruptcy. I was so privileged to learn bankruptcy from a sitting federal bankruptcy judge, and I just fell in love with it, and I took nearly every UCC course I could, and I was
Which is hysterical because UCC is so hard and is like my worst nightmare.
And I loved it. I really did. And, no one understood why I just fell in love with it, but I love the statute. Similar, people have the same passion about tax law as well. That's kind of code-based law. And I just was not interested in international law. I had friends that traveled and, went to different countries, and they were studying different communities and health law and different things, and I just was like, I need to be bankruptcy. I was so interested in what, it meant to be a bankruptcy attorney. So I think I'm a good example of someone that came in wanting to do international law and the glamour of, traveling, and then realizing I'd rather just practice bankruptcy law.
Liz, was UCC your favorite? Sorry.
Okay, wait. I'm going to ask one question here. What is UCC?
Oh.
It's the Uniform Commercial Code. And it governs, secure transactions to commercial paper it's just a really thick code that everyone probably dreads reading in law school.
It governs a lot of business transactions, and most states have implemented the UCC now. So it was kind of put out by ALI, American Legal Institute, I think, and then a lot of states have since adopted it. So it's kind of across the board how that stuff gets dealt with, but it is just massive and really dense. Rachel loves it. Just increased her dorkiness quotient.
Yes, definitely hashtag bankruptcy nerd, hashtag UCC nerd, right?
Okay, so let's go back to Liz. Was UCC your favorite thing in law school?
Guys, I'm still sensitive from the bar, okay? Oh. We're talking about UCC.
Oh. Liz, did you know what you wanted to do?
Oh, I mean, no, not at all. At the time, I was like, yeah, I'm going to be an adoption lawyer. Was all gung-ho about it. Was going to stay part-time and work. And then last minute, got into American in D.C. and decided to do full-time, quit my job, and kind of start fresh. It's still something that's really interesting to me and very specific type of law, but I'm still searching for what I really want to do now.
Cool. All right. So the LSAT, the best part of the admissions process. My personal favorite at the moment. How did you all prepare for the LSAT? Did you self-study or did you guys take classes?
I took classes. I took Testmasters in DC. I took it 2 or 3 nights a week. I can't even remember. While I was working, my now husband and I were just dating at the time, and thank God he was doing grad school applications at the same time because we spent a lot of time just sitting across from each other's computers, with me studying for the LSAT and him doing grad school applications as well and studying for the GMAT. So I honestly think that saved my relationship. So in that sense, the LSAT was a positive thing, but otherwise I don't really have much positive to say about the LSAT. It's just a terrible, horrible rite of passage that you just have to do.
Do you have anything positive to say about it?
Oh, wow. Positive? I don't know. I was actually one that self-studied. And self-studying is very interesting. Funny enough, I think I got a higher score when I self-studied than when I took the course. So my big recommendation is to really figure out the way you study and the way you learn. And I know for me, it was better just me with a book in my apartment in undergrad and studying. And after, definitely when I took it again the second time, I realized that the course wasn't the best thing for me at all.
I had a similar experience. I took a course, and that when I was in my senior year of college, and then I self-studied a year later when I was off, and I did 4 points better the second time around because I realized how I need to study and what was important for me in studying. But just kind of a little caveat, it seems really difficult now, but in law school, all exams are, 3-4 hours, and you're going to have a lot of them, not just one, once a year. So just, understand that if you really struggle with that, it's something that's not going to end after the LSAT. So keep that in mind.
Yeah.
That's a really good point, Liz.
And then there's the bar exam, right?
Oh, yeah.
There's a bar.
Liz is like, too soon.
Yeah, that's a whole nother Google Hangout in itself.
Yeah, agreed.
Oh, yay, it looks like Holland just joined.
Oh, fantastic. Our current resident law student, she's closer to this than all of us.
Can she hear us? All right, let's jump into the next question while she gets situated. So when you started to look at which schools to apply to, did you have any non-negotiables in law school application? There's Holland.
Can she hear us? Unclear. Well, Liz, go ahead.
Okay, I was just going to say, for me, because I was planning to go part-time, that was a big non-negotiable, looking at schools that had really good part-time programs when I started, but then I ended up going full-time anyway, so it didn't make a difference. But that was a major factor in my application process.
Go ahead, Ray.
Oh, I was just going to say, I think it's important to know where you want to live. I know it's really hard to predict, but a big factor for me is that I knew I wanted to be either in Florida or my hometown of Washington, D.C. So I really focused in regards to law schools, looking at schools that were either in Florida or the East Coast area, because definitely when it comes time for studying for the bar, a lot of law schools cater, or at least have classes geared towards that state's bar exam, and I think that definitely helped out.
Yeah, and I agree with Rachel, and I think the only thing that I would add to that is that if you're not sure where you want to be, which was my problem, I wasn't sure if I wanted to stay in DC or move to New York or where I wanted to be, and the advice I got was, go to the best school that you get into, because it'll be easier to have a national presence at those schools, and your degree will be more fungible. So kind of depending on what your interest is, if you want to be in Texas, then I got to tell you, University of Texas is your best place to go, because you're going to get, or another Texas law school, but you'll have the connections and the network that'll be in the state you want to be in. And so I totally recommend that. I completely agree. But if you're not sure where you want to go, then you want to think about that too.
All great advice. So during the application process, was there any particularly good advice that you received or bad advice that helped you get through it?
So I know I already said it earlier, but the good advice I received was to keep up with your application after it was submitted. Visiting the schools, touring the schools, contacting alumni from your undergrad that were there currently, sending in a recommendation from your current boss. I guess schmoozing them really is like in this sort of way after you've already applied, because it'll remind them of who you are, because they're getting a lot of applications of people that are like you. In undergrad, this is actually the piece of advice I got. In high school, you may have always excelled and been in the group of people excelling, and then in undergrad, you're still in this group of people with good grades and internships, and leaders of organizations. Then when you get to law school, you're competing with everybody that's in that pool, in that pocket. That was always the best and the highest along the way. So you really have to remember that and make yourself stick out.
Yeah, I think Liz gives a great point. I went through a kind of a different situation than a lot of people. When I finished my applications, in part because of where I was applying, I was waitlisted at 3 schools and in at none. And so the question for me started to become, what am I going to do if I don't get into law school this year? I ended up getting in, obviously, and that all worked out. But one of the best pieces of advice I got was, during that waitlist period, continue to follow up, continue to tell your story. And I do think, something that I made the mistake of is, I thought that my paralegal experience was really important to my application. In fact, my paralegal experience was the same as probably 30% or more of the people who were applying to those law schools. So it doesn't make you stand out. So Liz's advice in terms of figuring out what makes you stand out and what makes you different, I think is really important. And spending the time to kind of do that, I think is good. And I'm a big fan of free writing, creative writing. Take a piece of paper and write down every adjective you can think of and see what comes out of that. No holds bar. Use different colored pens if you need to, whatever. But just something that gets you out of a really logical mind that's great for the Lsat and great for law school, but that doesn't necessarily mean you're going to represent yourself in the most standout way.
All right. Rochelle, what about you?
Oh, yeah. I would say some bad advice that I received was not to apply to the same, your undergrad's law school. So not be, I guess, for example, you went to the University of Florida, don't apply to the University of Florida's law school. I think that's pretty bad advice. It doesn't hurt in terms of future applications. I don't think anyone says, hey, you decided to stay at the same school for 8 years or 6 years. And I'm actually someone that went to my law school's undergrad, and I don't think I got anything bad from it after. I think it was really good because during my application process, I had the ability to contact admissions counselors and professors at my school's law school because I had that direct access. So I think in a sense it would be helpful. I know some people discourage it, but I encourage it.
I think Rachel makes a really important point too, which is use all the resources you have at your undergrad. Whether you've been out for a little while or not, there's people there who can help you, who are willing to talk to you. Look at your network and see, do I know anyone who knows a lawyer? And try and get the chance to really talk to those people. They'll give you good advice, and I think it's just helpful to hear about what life is like as a lawyer.
All right. Holland, are you with us?
I think so. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Great. Yay!
Do you want to just take a minute and introduce yourself, your name, law school, kind of, etc.?
Okay. Hi, I'm Holland Randolph. I am a 2L at George Washington University in Washington, D.C.
Awesome. So we have left off, we're talking about law school applications, and you, out of everyone, has most recently completed law school applications since you're a 2L. Did you receive any particularly good advice or bad advice when you were working on your applications?
I would say, I'm trying to think. Good advice would be when you're doing your personal statements, have at least 3 people read over them. And I think that was something really good. Bad advice? I don't think I got any really bad advice. Nothing that I can think of off the top of my head. So, trying to think. Probably not go to law school. That was probably some bad advice that I'm glad I didn't follow. But yeah.
I think that's a really important point. It's something that I know, Laura, you've talked about hearing, and Holland, you've obviously been close to that. I think a lot of people tell people not to go to law school. And I think to some extent, if you're not positive it's what you want to do, definitely do your research and really figure out But if you're really excited and what you want to do is law school, just be prepared to kind of let all of that go. Slide by.
Definitely. So kind of moving on from the application process to actually law school, since people do tend to have a little bit of a negative view on it these days. What was the most challenging part of law school, and what advice would you give your law school self now?
So for me, the most challenging part, it's kind of similar to what Rachelle and I were talking about with our Lsat, our studying habits. It was really hard for me to realize how I actually needed to study. I thought I needed to, read every case, go to every class, make my own outlines, and that's how I would study for the exams. And by the second year, I realized using other people's outlines or generic outlines and editing them through the semester was the best way for me to study. And I had wasted a lot of time my first year, and it really does affect your grades because you're spending so much more time. So that was the most challenging part, was really realizing what works best for me, not trying to follow the pack, not necessarily listening to what everyone else is doing, whether it's study group. Like, it's okay to not be in a study group. It's okay to work on your own, and really just getting to what works best for you. Because kind of how I said before, in undergrad, you kind of know where you sit in comparison to your other classmates, but in law school, you're ranked all together, and your grade is affected based on their grades. And so you really have to pay attention to how to make yourself stick out and what study habits are best for you to do so.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense.
I would say if I had to tell my law school self, my 1L self, something, I would say be fearless. I think after orientation, I was so scared. I came into law school, I was magna cum laude, and I had, all these great things that I did in undergrad, and I was like, yeah, I'm going to kill law school, I'm going to be on lottery and all these things, and I got into orientation, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is not what it looks like on TV. Like, I was just so scared. I just sat, and there were so many people, and they all, we had, even in orientation, we had people that were very outspoken and people that had these crazy personalities, and I'm just sitting there like, oh my gosh, like, what did I sign up for? And it really carried through my entire first semester. I was so scared to the point where, like, I didn't want to speak to professors. I didn't know if I should. Was it bad? Should I be in study groups? Should I not be in study groups? And I would tell my 1L self to be fearless. Don't be afraid. Like, make mistakes if you make mistakes. If you flunk your first test or the midterm, so what? You'll be fine. And I think that fear, if it wasn't there, I think I would have been able to have a different experience my 1L year. My second semester, I was much better, but the first semester, I was beyond scared.
I would echo both Liz and Rachel's pieces of advice. In addition to that, I would say, figure out where the resources are at your school. I had worked myself up into such a emotional state in my 1L year that it was 2 weeks before finals, and I was walking in the stairway, and I literally had a full-on panic attack, like heart racing, the whole 9 yards. And what I didn't feel like I could stop at that point. I didn't feel like I could, stop studying, or, I thought it was going to be the end of my law school career if I did that. But what I did find is, a doctor who could help me and who kind of, set me on the right path, basically for getting through those 2 weeks, because she listened to me and she realized that I wasn't going to stop. So the best thing to do was to try and get me through those 2 weeks. For finals, and then after that it was about kind of getting myself righted again. And it's just, I think you don't know until you're there the amount of stress that law school can be, regardless of whether you've kind of been in stressful situations before or not. So I would just say make sure you figure out where your resources are and don't be afraid to use them, whether that's professors, doctors, and friends, whatever it is, definitely use those.
All right, and Helen, what's the best advice that you would give to a future 1L or a 1L starting this fall?
I think the best advice I would give is just to be open. Be open to new things, be open to new people, especially for a lot of people because, like you said, we all had really great accomplishments, and you have to realize that studying the law is completely different than studying anything else. So it's something that you have to be open-minded to it. You have to be open-minded to a new way of learning. Like Liz was saying, maybe someone else's study habits isn't the way for you to go. You may have to try something different, or even something different than you did in undergrad. And also take care of yourself. I think, like Katie said, we had a few people. I didn't have any health issues because I was lucky enough to have other people tell me, like, do some exercises for 30 minutes and do different things. But we did have a few. I had a few, classmates in my section who, they were rushed to the hospital during exams and stuff because people do have panic attacks and different things. So just take care of yourself and, be open to new things and new possibilities.
All really great advice. All right, so I think that's pretty much all the questions I have, unless you guys have any other advice or thoughts that you want to share, pre-law, 1L, or law school or otherwise. Any last thoughts?
I have just a quick one that I want to share, just because I'm going through it now. Definitely make sure you understand, we mentioned a little bit before, the financial, not burden, but the financial investment that law school is. Depending on if you're moving to a new city, understanding how much cost of living is there, understanding that internships might not mean paid internship. You might want to do a career that you're working, as like a public defender, and that salary is much different from a law firm salary. So just make sure you understand what that means. And like, for example, my undergraduate loans went into effect a week after I graduated from law school. You don't get the 6-month grace period after that, but there's ways to work around it. Just make sure you know going into it, because you don't want to mess something up later in your life because you didn't understand fully what was happening financially.
I think that's a great point, Liz, because I think it's also a time that can be really stressful, and so across the board you want to understand what's going on, with both. If you have loans from undergrad, I did too, Liz. I totally know what that felt like, and you're trying to study for the bar, and your undergrad loans are coming due again, and you're just like, I can't deal with this right now.
Yeah, exactly.
But so the more that you understand, and I really put that also in the column of make sure you understand how much debt you're taking on. If you don't need to take the debt on, don't take it. I think it varies a lot school to school and kind of how you choose to live during law school, and I just think that's important to really keep in mind, because it is a big investment, and you want to make sure it's worthwhile. And the other thing that I'll say, just as a plug for Ms. JD, obviously get involved with Ms. JD. You can write if you want to, tell your story. We've had a lot of pre-laws telling their story on our blog. We have all sorts of events and things that you can do in addition to these Google Hangouts. But definitely make sure you're signed up for the newsletter and following us on Twitter and all that good stuff. So we'll hopefully see you around.
Helen, any last thoughts or advice?
Last thought. Well, I would say, like I said, the worst advice I ever got was not to go to law school. So I would say, basically like Katie said, if it's something that you really enjoy, something that you really want to do, I think that you should go. Of course, like you said, there are some financial strains that they have. I mean, be smart about it. Of course, you're going to law school, so most people are going to be smart. Just be smart about it. Research everything. But if it's really in your heart and it's really what you want to do, I say go for it.
All right. And with that, we'll wrap it up and we'll go off the air. Feel free to follow along at msjd.org and tweet at us on Twitter. I'm going to turn this off.
Night.